also citizens and criminals.
1 minute, and let's watch the hard R if you can. All right. Thank you so much, Classy Neurotic, for your opening statement. We'll head it over to First Amender. So just looking at the time right quick, you'll have 8.5 minutes on the floor. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. We walk headfirst into flames, and I do not see the people engulfed bother themselves with screaming. They simply smile with a red hat on, and only when it is too late do they regret their actions. And even some don't even do that, as their bodies remained a charred husk to be dragged away by the sycophants of an orange dictator. Must not have been a real supporter, as alarm bells echoed beyond the valleys. Yet it mattered not, for the sycophants cut their ears off years ago to maintain their blind devotion to the orange man. There I stood peering at a giant screen, faded and covered in stains, audio caked with interference as the splendor of the orange man had faded with every broadcast. Yet I remembered what he had said and what was repeated and touted, torches lit in his name, brethren treated as common refuse, to not be trusted any longer, and the sycophants chided and jeered at my brothers around me. When Mexico sends its people, they are not sending their best. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're bringing rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. June 16th, 2015. In his campaign announcement. You also had people who were very fine people on both sides, which was said in response. During the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, where white supremacists and court protesters clashed. He is not a war hero. He is a war hero because he was captured. I like people who weren't captured, in reference to his own alliance, the Republican Party, to John McCain, July 18th, 2015. Why are we having all of these people from shithole countries come here in reference to Haiti, El Salvador, and African countries in July 11th, 2018? Donald J. Trump is calling for a total, complete shutdown of Muslims entering into the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what is going on. Responded that spread Islamophobia and discrimination after these statements were uttered on December 7th, 2015. Why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came on July 14th, 2019, targeting 4 Democratic Congresswomen of color over a tweet? I'd like to punch him in the face at a rally in Iowa to a protester. If you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, would you, on February 1st, 2016? Send her back towards Representative Ilhan Omar, July 17th, 2019. The chants continued, and the sycophants cheered, and they each cut each other's ears off and opened their mouths wide to chant his name, screaming digitally and vocally for all to hear. And then, as all hope had faded, he lost. The sycophants, pearly eyes covered in tears, took their clubs, pitchforks, and guns, storming the Capitol on that day. The transfer of power was to be enacted to an old, sensible man with beliefs that any would find sensible in a sensible world. Yet to the sensible, and even to the sycophants, this was not a sensible world anymore. The election was rigged, they said. The Justice Department is rigged, they said. The FBI is rigged, they said. The courts are rigged, they said. The media is rigged. It was all rigged. Even the judges he appointed were rigged to the sycophants, to the orange man. Yet the sensible considered the positions and reviewed evidence for widespread fraud across many states and districts, empty-handed of the evidence that they said they would find. Yet it mattered not, for the sycophants cut their ears off and only spoke louder. There they were along the Capitol building. They screamed the names of the politicians. Where's Nancy? And hang Mike Pence. Fight like hell, said the orange man to the angry crowd. He sent out information to the vice presidents. Do not certify this election. He told them, and the vice president said no. And there they were storming the Capitol, all because they cut their ears off and would not hear the truth. But it mattered not, for they had the orange man behind them, for he would never steer them the wrong way as they tread into the flame, would they? The orange man, who had long since left the conflagration of the foot of the Capitol, was quietly watching TV from the White House. It was only hours after heavy pressuring from his own staff that he begrudgingly said over video, I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everybody knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt, though it was already too late, for their ears were cut off. It required the slow deployment of law enforcement and the National Guard. The mayor declared a 6 p.m. curfew for arrest. The leaders spoke high and wide to stop the violence, and then and only then did the rioters eventually disperse. This left the once beautiful United States scarred in its democratic processes for years to come. It could never happen here, spoke my parents from Chile, who knew what coups d'etats looked like from memory. We have too many checks and balances of power to prevent this from happening, they said. He refused a peaceful transfer of power, but it mattered not, for the sycophants have cut their ears off and they have walked into flames blindly smiling with a red hat on. The sycophants were including amongst the others under the sole condition, an unconditional demand for loyalty. And there they are handed a dagger to each one and stitches to close the wounds shut where their ears were. The orange man revered himself as the only one capable of saving our beloved country. I will be a dictator for one day, he said. But why would that matter? Their ears were cut off long ago. They would not listen to reason. They walked into the flames, covered and even requested gasoline to cover their bodies to be even more splendorous in their doom. He vilified his opponents. He spread misinformation and blatantly false statements. He reinforced his image of a strong leader. He gave his America First rhetoric, calling those who were also citizens rapists and criminals.
1 minute, and let's watch the hard R if you can.
It mattered not to the sycophants. Their ears were cut off long ago. He scapegoated the minority, often marginalized group that amassed no more than 2% of the total population. By stoking the flames of xenophobia, he could play into the natural fears of others. There were those on his side who refused to cut their ears off to the truth. The sycophants angrily shoved the knife in their hand, demanded that they cut their ears off to the truth, and then they tossed it in the trash. Must not have been a real supporter. Rhino, rhino, they chanted and jeered. Teeth barred and ears cut off. The press is the enemy of the people, said the orange man, screaming at journalists and media covering him. Fake news, he yelled, and the sycophants screamed in unison, and the media cowered and feared, only doing their jobs as they've been doing for over 100 years. They thought that they could not trust the media, who had vested interest in preserving the reputation by speaking the truth. Biased source, they shouted, and those with ears... I apologize. I would have continued, but go ahead.
No, it's okay. We did reach the end of our time, so I am sorry for cutting you off, but I thank you for respecting the timer there. So we are going to kick it over to the other side to respond to some of what they've just heard and try to get into an open discussion. So I will remind everybody once again, we've got several super chats already coming in. Thank you so much to everybody who's already put in there. We appreciate your support of the channel, and we do have other live events that will be coming up. So yeah, once again, super appreciate the support. We'll get to your questions at the end. Rob, you were trying to jump in there, so I'll hand it on over to you.
Absolutely, Josh, if you don't mind. I'd like to respond. Now, I'll admit, though, to being inspired. I thought to talk about issues that affected Americans in a way such that the average person could understand. But I've been inspired to understand that prose is not the way to go in this debate. So if I may, with some impromptu poetry to respond to that great soliloquy that we just heard. And as they stood, glistening skin, yellowing from lack of nutrition, no longer could they afford groceries, no longer could they recognize their communities. As crime ran rampant, as they were locked down as non-essential, as their First Amendment was stripped from within, they looked to the heavens. Where could they find sustenance? And then they saw the answer. They could eat the anger at the mean tweets. They could go to the argument of 2016. Therefore, sustenance is not worth what understanding that condemning a man for rhetoric as Hitler could be. January 6th would be their food, they yelled, and therefore they did cut off their ears, not for lack of hearing, but because they must eat something and ears were better than nothing being offered. That was quite literally one of the most insane, hilarious, and absolutely asinine speeches that I think should be clipped and will be clipped to represent exactly what this election represents. Discussions about mean tweets and angry things that were said going as far as 2016, relitigating January 6th once more, completely doing what I called out would be done in our opening statements, as did Josh, that you would focus on the character of Donald Trump, that you would say that he is this unique threat, and you would completely ignore all substance as to how his policies were better for even the groups that you claim are marginalized. You said nothing at all, either of you, about the economy. You said nothing about foreign policy. You said nothing about immigration, or for that many, any other policies. You didn't even mention one thing of Kamala Harris. You are both indicative of the exact problem. You parrot the establishment talking points, so at least you have your ears for that, I guess, and you ignore the suffering that everyday Americans of all creeds, ethnicities, backgrounds, and religions are suffering from now, so that you can stand on your high horse and repeat these talking points that Trump is some unique danger. Talking points, by the way, that were repetitions, as Classy did, of 2016. We were told he would lock up all gay people. He would kick all brown people out of the country. And yet nothing. Most of those communities were doing remarkably better then than they were under the Harris-Biden administration.
All right, let's give them a chance to respond to some of what you're putting out there. And if anybody sees me chuckling over here, my brain all of a sudden told me we should have brought a drum beat for this one. All right,
First Amendment was an absolute joke who wasn't taking it seriously. He's trying to sort of be like, whatever, these guys are like Nazis, whatever. And that's it. He is literally the stereotypical, like, oh, I don't give a shit. I know I'm morally superior, so I'm just going to joke my way through this, whatever. And what was terrible is he wasn't particularly good at the joking. The poem that he read for 8.5 minutes to open, which he still had more to read, is one of the cringiest, dumbest things that I've ever heard. I can't even begin to comprehend what would go into someone's mind that thinks that they're going to do a debate on a platform like Modern Day Debates, and their opening statement is going to be a poem. I just don't know. Maybe he knew who I was and knew that he was incapable of debating me substantively on facts, so he decided to try to use a form of persuasion that comes across as artsy. I don't know. I'm at a loss. I thought it was absolutely hysterical. And to any objective person that's not terminally online, like a regular Republican or Democrat voter, if you put them in the room and show them that, they would be like, what the hell is this? Yeah, the poem wasn't even good. I was able to mock the poem probably in a funnier, better way. And off the top of my head, I didn't have to pre-write it. Also, the poem thing directly ties into both Josh and I's opening statement that's like, listen, people are struggling to eat. People are struggling because of the terrible border policy. We're on the verge of World War III. And all the Democrats are offering is, but Trump's a really bad dude, mean tweets. And your response to that is to ignore all of that and read a poem. It's almost like, almost while that poem was being read, I was like, is this guy like a troll and he's actually a Trump voter? And he's doing this to sabotage Classy Neurotic? That's how bad it was. It literally was like he was intentionally sabotaging his side because he secretly wants Trump to win. I don't know what it says, flabbergasted. It truly, if the goal was to make me say, wow, that's something that it's going to take me a second to sort of come up with something to say against, he did. It did take me a second. Now, of course, by the time his 8-minute rambling poem was done, I was more than composed enough. The laughter had subsided enough that I was able to address the specifics of it. Yeah, I didn't know what to... I thought it was a joke at first. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Poor effort, poor effort. I guess it was something different than what I've seen. So, tip of the cap, First Amendment.